What's up, fellow go-givers? Juwan Buford, broadcasting Detroit metropolitan area. And look, what I want to talk about is an uncomfortable conversation I had today that allowed me to kind of work through some things that I thought would be very beneficial to entrepreneurs and people who are in sales management positions or individuals who are just at a place where you're required to level up in terms of your leadership. And I had a conversation with a business partner today that I felt safe with. Because oftentimes, one of the most difficult things you have to manage when you're in a leadership position, well, other people are looking to you for guidance, resources. You have to be real. Sometimes there are people around you who don't necessarily want to see you win. They're just there because they benefit right from you. And so you have to have a little bit of discernment in terms of who you need to talk to get some constructive criticism. And it was born, or the desire to receive this criticism, to receive this feedback, was on the best piece of advice I'd ever received in business. And it was from a mentor of mine who I'd gotten into a dispute with years ago, and he looked at me dead in the face. He says, "Juwan, I don't care what comes out of your mouth, it's your fault." And I remember just being so upset. I remember being so like on 10 about that being shared with me, because at the time when I received this advice, I was winning. At least I thought I was, right? I was new to the direct selling industry, and I was inviting guests. I was building a team. More importantly, as far as I was concerned, I was out here helping business owners the resources they needed to level up, utilizing the tools at my disposal with the company. And I felt like I was winning, right? And I remember there was a couple incidences that occurred where the expectation was that I was supposed to be present somewhere. And instead, I was out in the field doing the work. Like one of the business mentor I'm referring to, we had pretty much, nip and tuck, constant phone calls to get them to come out to the Detroit metropolitan area. And, I filled the room. I had guests in the room. I had business partners in the room. He was going to give, a mentorship class on how to be successful as an entrepreneur, not just talk for being successful in the direct selling industry, but just the type of principles and things required to be successful, period. And I wasn't there. And because I was out doing what I was doing, which was going out and talking to more people, I was going out prospecting. My objective was to work up until the very end to get people in the room. And I didn't realize I was an error in judgment at the time, right? Because at the time, I looked at things in much the way that any solopreneur or any person that's self-employed will look at it, right? Oftentimes, we tend to focus on the results as opposed to the process. The result was I put butts in seats. The result was people got a chance to hear the information, but I wasn't there, right? And I remember this really egged the mentor that I'm referring to. And then another situation occurred where he came into town, and I was responsible for driving him to an event. And because of miscommunication with my ex-wife, the bottom line is, not going into in depth and detail, things didn't go as planned in the morning, right? And for me, a person that prides myself on being on time, if not being early, the uber majority of the time, to drop him off late at that event was like a huge embarrassment. Number one, I let the marketplace down. Even though it wasn't egregious late, it was late enough, right? I let my own teammates down. I let myself down, right? And in my mind, I was thinking it wasn't my fault. I was like, it was somebody else's behavior that resulted in what transpired there, right? And, but once again, the event went off fantastic. The result was individuals had a really good time. They received the information. It landed well. Overall, it was a good experience. Got a little bit of recognition, all that fun stuff. But once again, as opposed to focusing on the process, I was just focused on the result. And so I remember one day, mentor once again flew into town, and we're sitting down talking. He's asking about my business, and I'm telling him about all the things that are going well, but I just don't have the momentum that I expected. I'm not getting the traction that I desire. Things aren't happening fast enough. And, it's just, there's not the stickiness, right? I felt like I was constantly pushing a rock up a hill. And I'm not afraid of the work. We all know the common denominator of success is work. But I felt like, man, the flywheel should be moving a lot faster. And that's when we had that conversation. He said, look, there are certain things you're supposed to show up to. There's a certain way you're supposed to show up. And I was like, 99.9% of the time, I am doing everything. But he said the 1%, it still matters. And he said part of the reason why you're not having success has nothing to do with the people around you, has nothing to do with the company, has nothing to do with your leadership or individuals who look to you for leadership. It's you. You are the cause of your problems. And as I said before, I remember, man, I was on fire. I was angry as all get out. I mean, he and I were face to face. His face was bloodshot red. I had a very, I'm sure, obvious look of anger and frustration. And things weren't good with us for a little while. But eventually, as I matured as an entrepreneur and as I matured as a human being, I understood exactly where he was coming from. It was my fault. Because business is not simply the achievement of things. Being successful as a business owner is not simply results or outputs. The process does matter, right? And I wasn't good as I should have been for the results that I wanted. I wanted to be elite. My process and the way I went about things had to reflect an elite approach. And at that time in my business, it wasn't the case. So I fast forward to today, right? And once again, having success, enjoying the fruits of my labors, but also very blessed and fortunate that those who are leaders think enough of me to pour into me, and that people believe in me enough to say, hey, look, I believe in where you're going. I'm going to take this ride with you, right? Very blessed and fortunate. But once again, I had reached a point recently where I was like, things should be moving faster. It should be easier. And I did something that I think a lot of individuals have a difficult time with. And I sought out somebody whom I know would tell me the truth. I sought out someone that was close to me. I sought out someone who I knew had my back, believed in me, but would not be afraid to tell me what I needed to hear. And the bottom line is, what I was told was I have a blind spot. And what was that blind spot? The blind spot was a lack of empathy. It was a lack of empathy, right? And I'm not going to go into a bunch of excuses as to why the lack of empathy was there, because that doesn't solve anything. But that conversation was so beneficial to me. Because the reality of the matter is I did lack empathy, right? I came up in an environment as a child, in my personal life, in my family and household life, and there was respites, right? But the bottom line is, it was hostile. I grew up in a neighborhood that was hostile. I attended a Catholic school where I was only pepper in the school. And I think I was like part of the first group of individuals to integrate that school here in the Detroit metropolitan area. And I remember every single day for 8 years, it was constant warfare, right? I was constantly being picked on or picked out, especially early on. I was constantly having a fight to be respected, right? Oftentimes, you can imagine a lot of the conflicts occurred because of the complexion of my skin, right? And the fact that I was like unabashed about wearing clothing and adorning myself, that was very much reflective of the culture that I came from. And so there was constant conflict there, right? And over the course of time, that conflict kind of hardened me, right? And then I attended high school after middle school, after going to this Catholic school, where every single day it was some type of conflict going on about my complaint. It was always something, right? But then I'm attending high school, and I was born and spent a lot of time on the block. So you see a lot, you experience a lot. You have to grow through a lot. Let's put it that way. But I'm also this nerd, right? I'm this guy that had read a couple encyclopedias by the time I reached high school. I was an avid reader, right? The one thing that I love and appreciate that my grandparents instilled on me in me was a love for learning. And so I have this exterior, just a little bit, wasn't a thug by any stretch of the imagination. It was just one of those things where just don't test me, right? I wasn't afraid to smoke. Let's just put it that way. Um, but I'm also this nerd, didn't quite fit in. And so as you can imagine, if you're a nerd attending the inner city of Detroit, attending one of the high schools, caught flack because of that. Constantly teased, betrayed. It felt like once every year I had to knuckle up to let people know that, hey, you don't want it, right? You can get it, right? But it was constant conflict. And to be transparent with you, even at that point in my life, I had more people telling me what I could not achieve, more people telling me what wasn't possible, right? Because being a nerd, I had this imagination, I had this vision for myself. And I never thought I was better, but I was like, man, there's more, right? The zip code I come from, the last name that I carry, the environment I came in, no, there's more to be achieved than this, right? I'm not these things. I know there's a world out there for me. And when you think differently, when you move differently, when you have different priorities, I just wasn't on the same time as everyone else, right? And so there was a lot of conflict there. And then I graduate from high school to college. And trust me, I'm going somewhere with this. And, attending University of Michigan at the time where affirmative action it was like conflict laden. And I remember like it was yesterday. I remember I was sitting in the classroom, young lady in biology class stands up, Asian American lady, and she basically says Darwin's theory is absolutely true, and and that the reason why African Americans are at the bottom of society is because the bottom line is African Americans are just intrinsically and biologically inferior. Now, fortunately, I did a lot of reading, and I came back with a really good, comeback, and it's exposed to ignorance, right? About that being one of the most dumbest things you could ever say, because number one, human beings haven't evolved that much over the thousands of years, okay? Since we started standing upright, there's not been a dramatic change in intellect or brain capacity or any of those things, right? Number two, how do you explain the fact that, people of African descent literally ruled the world and traveled the world and built some of the wealthiest kingdoms that the world's ever known? And every type of science you can think of was built on the blocks of those people who came out of hard Africa. Anyway, smacked her up, smashed that. But you can imagine going into classrooms and dealing with that type of stuff all the time, right? And it hardened me even more so, right? I became even less empathetic. I became even less inclined to engage or deal with issues as it relates to criticism or slights or attacks. There's a little alligator skin. And then after coming out of college, I ended up becoming an investment advisor. And once again, I'm in an environment where I'm the only pepper in the room, right? And I'm watching other people, my peers, elevate and level up because they're having conversations I'm not having. They're being invited to the bars. They're being invited to the after work events, right? They're going to these other places and they're getting the toolage I'm not getting. And so I had to scratch, claw, and fight to be successful in that industry early on. 'Cause I didn't have the mentorship. There wasn't people in the office. There wasn't a lot of people in the industry, particularly in the state of Michigan. And those who were in the industry were so busy trying to level up themselves, they weren't necessarily inclined to level up, right? Help another person level up. I never wanted a hand out. I wanted a hand up. Just wasn't there. And so as a result, once again, right, being in a hostile environment and having to navigate through those waters and build a successful business, build a successful practice, learn the things I needed to learn, seek out the mentorship, watch the mistakes, be more acute in everything that I did, right? And I remember like it was yesterday, a client said to me, she pulled me aside after I helped her make some important financial decisions that worked out well for her. But she pulled me aside and she said, Juwan, you are really sharp. Like, you got this chip. You're really sharp and you don't need to be. You can calm down. Like, we see your intellect. We see your work ethic. We see what you're about. We know you're about it, right? Despite all the challenges you may be going through, personally and otherwise, we see it. So you can relax. I remember looking at her thinking, no, I can't. Because when you leave this office, you don't know what I have to deal with, right? Man, just once again, the constant slice, the constant diminishment of accomplishment. People really didn't try to dismiss my intellect because once again, I was sharp and I was mean and I become mean throughout all these different processes. That's how this stuff landed with me, right? And the advice I received today was so on time because you know what? I hadn't stopped. That was an evolution that had not transpired yet in my leadership journey. The bottom line is I was told that by my business partner, look, Juwan, we see you have good intentions. We see that we don't ever question your intention, right? Those of us who know you that work with you. But she said, even though you're not raising your voice, sometimes when you talk, you yell. Sometimes when you talk, you yell. She said, sometimes when you are addressing people, you're not purposely being mean-spirited. You're not purposely being hard. You're not purposely trying to break somebody down. But it's like you can become very assertive real quick, right? You're real quick to stand 10 toes down. And sometimes it's just unnecessary. So, the way you speak with people doesn't always leave people intact, doesn't leave them whole. People who don't know you may feel like you don't have much respect and regard for them, right? And that was a really tough pill for me to swallow because, yeah, I'm always looking, when I'm dealing with people, my goal has always been when I meet a person, even if they don't like me, even if they don't have regard or respect for me, like I lost that piece for the most part, right? I just don't care how people think. I don't care what people's opinions are of me the majority of the time. I'll be frank. It just doesn't register. It doesn't land with me. I'm an introvert, and how people feel about me is not all that important. It's about how I feel about myself, right? And that's how I've always rolled out. But the bottom line is it's a double-edged sword, right? Because that thick alligator skin, that I don't give a F about people's perspectives. I don't give a F about people's opinions. I don't give a F about how you feel about what it is I'm doing. I'm doing good work in the community. I'm helping people. The majority of people that I've ever put my hands on have been blessed by the fact that I've been willing to take time to help them out. That's my mindset going in, right? But the bottom line is that lack of empathy, right? And understanding that even the people who say they don't need empathy, even the people who say they don't need to be quote unquote coddled, even the people who say they give it to me straight. No. One of the toughest lessons I've had to learn recently is that no, people want you to give it to them straight, but tonality matters, right? And it's easy to fall into the trap when you've gone through some BS.com, when you've known conflict from as far back, right? And I know there are people listening to this, you know where I'm coming. You've come from those places where you've gone through the stuff. And what ends up happening is, I know what it is, right? You end up looking at people and you're like, I've been through this. I came through this. I overcame slander. I overcame abuse. I overcame people thinking less of me. I've overcome dehumanizing behavior. I've overcome haters. I've overcome backstabbers. I've overcome people who betray. I've overcome people who may not have seen my vision and persevered through it anyway. But the bottom line is those other people around you have not had your journey. Because it's easy when you've overcome a lot to assume and look at people like, why can't you overcome this, right? Let's go. Let's move. Let's make it happen, right? There's work to be done here. And it reminds me of the adage, right? And I can't remember exactly where it comes from, but it basically says, look, you can move fast by yourself, but you go further with people. And when you're a person that has come through the fire and achieved things and accomplished things, yeah, you can move faster. And you get impatient with those who aren't moving faster, who maybe don't yet have your grit, who don't have your acumen, who don't have your understanding, who don't have that urgency, that drive, right? You lose touch with those people. Because you may not necessarily even be standing, quote unquote, in judgment of them, but you're like, come on, let's go. What's the problem? And then here's the thing too. They don't know your journey. They don't know what you've come through. They don't know what trials and tribulations you've overcome, right? So they can't understand why you're so intense. They can't understand why you're so exacting. They can't understand why you can be so sharp sometimes, right? They don't understand that it's not like you're upset with them. It's not like you think less of them. It's like you don't have any respect or regard for them. Excuse me, but sometimes just a lack of patience. And when you are in a leadership role, one of the most toughest lessons I've had to learn recently, and I've been learning, is that you got to be able to walk among the crowd. Not everyone is going to be a 10. Some people are going to, they're going to show up for the sake of showing up. They're going to show up because they want to be around. They want to be around the energy. They want to contribute. In other ways, they want to be a positive, right? They want to applaud. They want to celebrate. And if you dismiss those individuals, what ends up happening is they're an important part of the ecosystem because they make the environment more hospitable, in some respects more relaxed, which attracts people into that environment, into that ecosystem. And those people can be potential business partners. They can potentially be leaders. They can be potentially producers or go-getters, right? They can be the people you've been praying for. But if you make the environment uncomfortable for 80% of the people, because that's going to be 80% of the people who show up around you when you're building anything, they're not going to be the tip of the spear. They're not going to be 3%ers. They're not going to be 20%ers. Majority of people are 80%ers. You got to somehow still walk among them and they feel comfortable, whole, respected, and held in high regard and valued, right? And once again, when you're really urgent, when you're really ambitious, when you're really driven, it's easy to be dismissive, right? You're going to have the 20%ers who, once again, they're producing, they're helping, they're contributing, right? They're not just showing up and just sitting there, right? Their contributions make a difference, right? And they may not be on 10, right? They may not be an apex or elite competitor in this game we call entrepreneurship. But once again, they're valuable too, right? And of course, you do have to make space for those who are elite, who have bigger visions, who have more ambition, who want to achieve bigger and grander things, right? And you got to be humble enough to know when those people show up to give them the space to do what it is they need to do. Never really been a big, huge problem for me because I'm not competitive in that way, right? If someone shows up more effective and better, I'm like, hey, go, guy, go, girl, go, let's get it, right? How can I help? How can I contribute, right? It's never been my deal, but sometimes there are people where it is their deal, right? And so that's the conversation I had. It was invaluable feedback, for the people whom I know I was a problem. For those individuals, some of them I'm glad they're gone. Let me be transparent as well. Some of them I'm glad they're gone. I'm glad that me being a problem helped them find another place to go. But I know I also probably messed up a couple relationships because I didn't quite understand this blind spot that I had, right? And so, I'm grateful for the position I have acquired and the different endeavors I've been involved with, the people I've been able to help, lead, serve, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm also a tiny bit apologetic for the fact that I did have this blind spot. And I had to go through my journey. I had to go through my deal. And I'm thankful for the business partner that was willing to take the time to actually have the conversation with me and point out the fact that, look, you need to chill. You need to bring it down a notch. You need to understand that people, even though on the exterior, they may not be everything you believe they can be and everything they should be, they still have experiences. They still have skills. They still have knowledge and understanding that's valuable, even if they're not there yet, even if they're not ready to take on the load to the extent you would like them to. And also be aware that not everyone knows your story. Not everybody knows what you've had to transverse. And so because they don't know your story, they don't know your background, they don't know what you necessarily achieved and how everything you've had to grow through, right? They may not get while you have a certain intensity to your approach, a certain urgency to your approach, a certain I need to win no matter what, right? Approach to building your business. So I hope this serves you. And I hope it serves individuals who may be struggling with the same thing. I know there's a lot of people who have, because I know a lot of people have come through the fire, right? Have come from hostile environments. But you have to find a way to temper that. You have to find a way to smooth over the edges. Because, yeah, you might be effective, right? A solopreneur, a self employed person, once again, sometimes we measure things too much by the result, but not enough from the process. And process can set you free, right? The right processes can put you in a situation where you actually have results that are above and beyond what you really deserve because the process, the people, right? I've heard it said best moving fast in business, but sometimes you got to move slow with people. You got to be willing to do that. And I've learned that. So, with that being said, as always, I celebrate success in advance. Goodbye for now.